The World Bank, which is supposed to be about developing societies and fighting poverty around the world, one of the ways that it thinks that you fight epidemics is the creation of special bonds called pandemic bonds. And pandemic bonds are loans that are sold to investors, sold to pension funds, sold to hedge funds, and they pay a return to those big investors until a pandemic happens. And when the pandemic happens, the original capital that was invested in the bond, that is used to help countries deal with that pandemic. The problem is that in order to encourage big investors to buy these bonds, they've been structured in such a way that they don't really work at all. They've effectively never paid out to date. Despite the Ebola crisis and whatever else, they've never paid out. Now with coronavirus, pandemic bonds have finally been triggered. So we hope now that those bonds are going to pay out. However, these bonds have been paying out high rates of interest for the entire time that they've been issued to rich investors. So a lot of people have made money. It would be far, far better if we put society's resources into trying to take money out of tax havens, tax the super rich, tax big business, so that countries are able to develop decent, universally accessible public healthcare systems so that when something like this happens, they have a head start. They're ready to begin dealing with a public health crisis in a way that can actually meet the needs of everybody, but especially those who are going to struggle otherwise. The idea that you can kind of persuade the financial market to behave as if it was a development institution, as if it was something that was interested in solving poverty around the world is ludicrous. And we shouldn't tie ourselves up in knots like this. We need to tax, and we need to regulate, and we need to build up decent public services. I always like to think that after the Second World War, my grandparents' generation suddenly thought, we've been through this war, we've been through horrendous suffering, we want to build a better society. How do we do that? And one of the things they did in this country was to say, healthcare is too important to be dictated by the market. Whether I get treated or not, how much I suffer or not, should not depend upon how much money I've got in my bank account. Healthcare should be a given. It should be available to everybody in society, no matter where they come from. And that's where they created the National Health Service. And it was a very effective way of trying to re-level some of the inequalities that had evolved in society over a long period of time. And I think most people in Britain probably regard the National Health Service as kind of the pinnacle of civilization, of what, if we put our minds to it, we can achieve to create a better way of living. Exactly that kind of solution needs to be rolled out right the way around the world today. Unfortunately, the very institutions like the World Bank that are creating these ridiculous pandemic bonds have spent years and years and years telling countries they need to slash public spending, they need to privatize everything in sight, they need to liberalize their economies. They've made those kind of solutions that much more difficult. And we need to reverse course now very, very rapidly. And hopefully one of the few positives that might come out of this crisis is that we finally wake up to the damage that's been done to our ability to meet our needs as human beings by the ravages of the market for decades now. The mainstream media has become more and more dominated by vested interests. That's why alternative media is so utterly vital if we're to create the kind of better world that most of us want to create, and it's why things like Double Down News are so important. So please, please, please support it if you possibly can.